I don't know what's going to happen to me when I'm dead. I'm pretty sure my body's going to rot, my brain's going to stop working, and I will cease to exist. And it didn't bother me before I was alive, so I don't see why it'd bother me afterwards.
Neste debate, Cliffe e o ex-presidente da comunidade ateísta de Austin, Dillahunty, se enfrentam em uma discussão intensa. Os dois compartilham suas visões acerca de uma das perguntas mais intrigantes da humanidade: o que acontece depois da morte? Qual argumento fez mais sentido para você? Deixe sua opinião nos comentários.
What do you both think or believe will happen after you die?
I imagine my wife will get married to somebody else, and no, actually, she's going to run off with a friend of hers and have a whole bunch of cats. Oh, you mean what's going to happen to me? I don't know. I don't see any reason to think that anything's going to happen to me. Everything that makes me me, everything that we have historically and religiously attributed to a soul that can be identified with a place has a place in the brain. My personality is in my brain. We know from experiments on people who have suffered all sorts of brain damage that you can reset people's personality, their preference, their memories, their ability to make new memories. I'm going to get the name wrong. Vishwanathan, no. Somebody will know. Anyway, did a talk at one of the religion summits about a split brain patient, hemispherectomy. They can communicate with both halves, and each half has a separate personality and a separate identity and communicates independently. One half, Christian. The other half, atheist. Now, I guess you could argue that when we split that brain in half, there was only enough soul for one side, and the other side just got, shafted. But everything we know about what makes us us, our likes, our preferences, our desires, they're all a product of the brain. Now, a lot of theists would say that there's a soul behind it all. There's a puppet master, the ghost in the machine. And yet there's no evidence to support this. And it doesn't make sense in the model. If I suffer severe brain damage and all of a sudden I don't remember the past, I don't remember that I love my wife, I don't like the same foods, I don't want to interact with the same people, and now all of a sudden I believe in God, am I the same person? I don't think so. Haven't we really kind of ended up with a whole new person? I have an argument that I use partially as a joke. It's an argument that demonstrates, according to some traditions, nobody's in heaven, and it's really easy. In heaven, there's no suffering and no sadness, according to some traditions. My mom is convinced she's going to heaven. She's convinced I'm going to hell. Now, I don't know who's going to end up in heaven, but it won't be my mom. There's no way my mom could be up in heaven, not suffering and not sad that her son is in hell. And if God does some kind of magic to take that out of her, it's not my mom anymore. It's a facsimile of my mom. Some kind of robotic worshiping thing that's not my mom. My mom and I disagree vehemently on religious stuff, so much so we don't talk about it anymore because we love each other and we'd like to have a civil, Thanksgiving or Christmas or whatever religious holiday drives me up there to visit and hang out. By the way, we celebrate Christmas. Have a big white tree with peppermints and stuff on it. It's awesome. Entirely secular stuff. We're stealing it back because Christianity stole most of those things from other religions. And Easter too, but I'm not that big on eggs and candy because I'm diabetic. But everything that we know about us takes place in our brain. Your brain gets damaged. Are you the same person? I don't know. The math on souls is confusing. Sam Harris has talked about the math on souls for people who believe that zygotes get a soul because the embryo will sometimes split and then re-get together. So when it splits, does it have two souls? And then when it comes back together, does it just have one? Or now do we have a body with two souls? Or did we not put a soul in until afterwards? Or does it happen when he breathes his first breath, as the Jews believed? It doesn't make any sense. The math on souls doesn't make sense. The science on souls doesn't make any sense. There's no reason to think that there's some kind of ghost dictating what goes on in my brain. We haven't even gotten into free will. Cliff keeps asserting that we have it. I'm not convinced we do, at least not in the sense that he's talking about. I don't know what's going to happen to me when I'm dead. I'm pretty sure my body's going to rot, my brain's going to stop working, and I will cease to exist. And it didn't bother me before I was alive, so I don't see why it'd bother me afterwards.
Guys, we got to be honest with each other. If there is no God, we know exactly what happens when we die. If there is no God, there's no life after death. If there is no God, you are matter and energy. And when you die, the matter and energy fall apart. So let's not act like maybe there's life after death. No, that's illogical. If there is no God, when you die, when I die, we become fertilizer. Very logical, very reasonable. But you know what the problem is? The problem is that I've got to do funerals for families that are atheist or agnostic. And inevitably what happens to me is I'm standing there and they're coming up to me saying, well, you know, maybe, the Great Spirit. Excuse me? Great Spirit? What are you talking about? If there is no God, there's no spirit. There's matter and energy. And when we die, the matter and energy falls apart. Now don't get scared. Just face reality. Be objective. And don't allow your fears to get you knocking your knees saying, oh, well, maybe. Oh, well, possibly. No. Be rational. Use your good mind. If there is no God, when you die, you rot. When I die, I rot. End of story. Just think about it. Now, there's an alternative to that. And the alternative is that if there's a supernatural God, then possibly there is life after death. And I can promise you, I would never believe there's life after death because I'm scared to die. That's being a wimp. That's being a coward. Instead, you'd better use your brain, and you better start thinking, and you better figure out, does the evidence point to there being something more to reality than matter and energy, there being some type of God, or does there not? And then secondly, you better use your brain, and you better think real clearly. Does the historical evidence point to Jesus having died and risen from the dead or not? And I can promise you, if you believe there's life after death because you're scared to die, you're an intellectual wimp. And I would never believe there's life after death because I find it attractive. And Matt is wrong. I don't believe there's life after death because I've got this deep longing for life after death. But I'll tell you exactly what I do. If I find that I have a deep longing for something, I look at the evidence to find out, is there any truth to it or not? And if there's no truth to it, I drop it. But if there is evidence to support it, I would be very wise to follow that evidence. Now, why do I believe there's life after death? First of all, because the evidence says there is a supernatural God. And second of all, because the historical evidence is that Jesus was dead, and 3 days later, he rose from the dead. And the people who saw him risen from the dead died not for belief. They died for what they claimed to have seen, the dead Christ risen from the dead. If you claim to have seen something, like Matthew, Mark, John, Thomas, Philip, Andrew, Peter, if you claim to have seen the dead Christ risen from the dead, and then you stand before Roman soldiers, and the Roman soldiers say, Caesar is Lord, and live, or else maintain that Jesus is risen from the dead, and we will execute you for it. And if you stand there and say, I'm sorry, I've seen Jesus risen from the dead, that gives your claim tremendous credibility. So the evidence is Jesus rose from the dead. That's why I'm convinced when he promises you eternal life, if you trust in him, he ain't blowing smoke, he's speaking the truth.